Imagine a world beyond worlds, different planes of existence wrapped and weaved into one another. Chance, fate, questions of time, space, magic unbound, controlled by powerful casters since the dawn of time, able to bend and weave the world around them. You are one of these casters, looking to save the world or destroy it, depending on your choice. This is Magic the Gathering. Or if you're me, it's inside of a wildly white room, because you know what? Studio space? Who needs it? My name is Tyson Fraley, and I'm here to show you how to play Magic the Gathering. I could go into full strategy, but for the sake of ease for this video, we're just going to keep it down, succinct, simple, and just show you how to play the game. So that way, if you ever have one of your friends kind of mentioning a game night and they want to play Magic, you'll be someone who can step up to the roster. So, let's go over what all of these cards actually do. Bam! New camera angle. The key aspect to every deck that you're going to be running is the lands. The lands are your energy source, what you draw your potential for casting all different kinds of spells from. There are a variety of different kinds of lands. There's specialty lands or basics. Your basics are going to include, lands for the 5 different, oh god, I haven't even gone into the 5, okay, hang on, let's look through. I am a professional person who does these kinds of YouTube videos. It's occurring to me now how much of a blue-black fanboy I am. Every Magic the Gathering deck consists of one of 5 or multiple of 5 different colors. There's blue, which is, again, as I mentioned, I'm a blue fanboy, which is much more about controlling the board, being able to negate certain activations as per whatever your opponent wishes to bring out. It's essentially the control freak of all the different kind of deck colors. The next one, black. Black is, as one may assume, more focused in necromancy, very raising people from the dead, from your graveyard, and also very much a removal deck. It complements blue, thus making the blue-black archetype very well, because it's both able to counter, negate, and remove any creatures on your opponent's side of the board. There's red, which is a big ol' fun one, which is much more aggressive, deal damage right off the bat, not as much negation, but more general removal. Get a creature off the side of the board, stop your opponent from being able to swarm you. Then there's white, which is much more stacking the creatures that you have on board, making them more powerful, making sure that they're not going to be able to get hit with certain abilities like First Strike or Vigilance or Flying. It's very much Angels, the Divine, that sort of thing. Last but not least is green. Green is much more focused on big bad creatures that you're going to be facing up against. It's essentially just making your creatures bigger and stronger every time you want to set up an attack. Those are the 5 basic colors. Now, let's go into what each card actually means. So, as I was mentioning before, lands are the things that are going to be your mana. These are the things that you have to tap or cost to be able to cast spells. Your spells are every other kind of card that occurs in your deck. A spell can be a creature, a spell can be an artifact, it can be an instant, it can be sorcery, it can be a whole lot of things. Just know that your deck or your library is filled with spells that need to be paid with your lands. Here are the different kinds of cards you're going to be interacting with that are your spells. To start off, creature cards. Creatures are spells. They are things that are summoned to the field and thus require mana to be paid. How you determine how much mana a spell has to be paid is by looking on the top right-hand corner. As you can see, there is the mana cost right here. So it requires 1 blue mana and 2 of any other color. that is what allows you to add different colors of decks together, being able to do things like blue-black, for example, as I've already mentioned, or being able to do things like, I don't know, if you really wanted to make a green-red deck, that can definitely be done, and there have been examples. Oh, there also is worth note that there are also things known as legendary creatures. Legendary creatures can be added to your deck without issue. However, it is worth noting that regular creatures, you can stick up to 4 copies of them in your deck. You can only stick 1 legendary creature of one type in your deck. So say you had 3 different legendary creature types, you could put all 3 of them in your deck as long as it's just 1 copy each. The next one we're going to talk about is sorcery. Sorcery spells are, as you might assume, actual spells that go off on your turn. You can only cast sorcery spells on your turn, not on anyone else's. This is different than instant spells. Instant spells can be cast on your turn, your opponent's turn, at the end of your step, at the beginning of your step, doesn't matter when. Instant spells are a great way to be able to control the board in one way or the other, whether it's resurrecting creatures from your board, to counter spells, to anything at all. As long as it states instant, you can play it at nearly any step of the game. Next one, artifacts. Artifacts are typically equipment or different things that you can add to your land as an additional bonus. So what this means is that if it's an artifact equipment, you can play it, set it to your side of the board, and equip it to someone. Equipment does have an equip cost. However, that's not to say that all equip costs are the same. Some may change, some are different, and some even have additional benefits that could come with setting an equip cost. Another kind of spell that's worth noting is known as an enchantment. Enchantments are similar to sorcery spells where they need to be played on your turn. However, they usually span a large amount of time. So they could have an enchantment benefit that would allow you to, allow you at the beginning of your upkeep to search your library for a card that you need. That could help with setting up the rest of your combo to make sure that your opponent is put on defensive. There's a whole lot of different things that enchantments can do. Just make sure that you cast it on your turn. The last major type of spell I'm going to talk about are sagas. Sagas are usually last between 3 to 4 turns, and they have an effect at the beginning of each turn, or depending on if there's a certain action that takes place during that turn. Sagas are very good for channeling a synergy in amongst deck. If you need to get cards off your side of the field, off your opponent's side of the field, they're usually very good triggers for different kinds of deck synergies. The last kind of spell I'm going to talk about are planeswalkers. A planeswalker is a special kind of creature that you're able to put essentially not summoned onto the field, but just slightly outside of it. Planeswalkers are the commanders of the battle, the fighters that are standing over and being able to change the entire way that the battle is being fought. For example, there might be planeswalkers who are able to destroy opponent creatures, just negating them off the field. Now, what differentiates this planeswalker from other creature cards is that their health stays here. So Nissa of the Voice of Zendikar starts with 3 health. Now these ones can dictate if her health goes up or down. Certain bonuses, such as the one up here, will go up and allow you to trigger off the bigger effects, usually that occur down here. The big effects usually have something to do with wiping your opponent's entire board, being able to deal massive amounts of damage to their face as opposed to other creatures. Whether a creature lives or dies during a combat scenario with you facing off against your opponent is dictated by these 2 numbers here at the bottom. The first one is the damage that this creature deals. The second one is its toughness during battle. If your opponent has a creature that attacks you and use this creature as a blocker, if the opponent's creature deals more damage than 2, then this creature is destroyed. However, if the creature has less than that, your creature's fine. If you go in an attack and your opponent has a toughness less than 3, then this creature wins and that creature dies. If it has a damage output larger than 2, then this creature also dies as well. I'm going to show you a test hand so that way you'll have a better idea of what to look for and how to actually play the game in motion. When you're playing Magic the Gathering, you usually roll a d20 to determine who goes first. The person with the highest number gets to decide. So, let's say that you're going first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 cards starting in your hand. It's hard to see from down here, but I'm currently holding a lot of lands. That could be good, depending on the kind of deck I'm using. However, for this deck, I need more creatures that are going to be helpful on the field. So what you can do is mulligan. When you mulligan, you put these cards back in your deck, then draw 6, or 1 less than the last time previous. You can technically mulligan all the way down to 1, but of course then the game is going to be a lot more difficult for you. Get it? Okay, this is a bit better. So, I currently have 2 lands. The usual aim for how many lands you want in your opening hand are usually between 2 or 3. So, I have a land, I play it down, and I pass the turn. I don't have any cards in my hand that allow me to cast anything for 1 mana or lower. I mean, if there were anything lower, it would be no mana, and well, I mean, if you can find that card, please let me know. So, then your opponent goes. They are able to draw a card, and then put that in their hand. You do not draw a card at the start of the first turn, because technically you have first turn advantage as opposed to them. It's just a rule. They will probably cast 1 land and then pass it over to you. So, therefore, you draw. You then play another island. Now, I don't have any creatures or any sorcery cards that I can play for 2 mana or 1. However, I do have 2 cards that cost 1 blue land and 1 extra that are counter cards. These cards are instants, so therefore I can wait until my opponent attempts to play a card, then either bounce it back to their hand or to just destroy it outright. I let my opponent go. Let's say they're about to play a creature card that I don't want on the field. What I can do is I can tap 2. So this is how you expend your mana. You tap it. How you want to show that you're tapping your mana is up to you. The usual way is just to rotate it. However, you could move it to a different pile, you could move it, you could spread the 2 out and flip them over. You could take the cards and throw them at your opponent's face in a great show of mockery and distress. Usually, however, you just rotate. I pay my 2 mana, I then play down my card with a 2 mana cost, and then after it's done being played and the effect has taken place, you move it to your graveyard. It then comes back to my turn. I untap these 2, and I draw a card. Now let's say that you're summoning a creature. Let's say, for instance, one of these was a swamp, and I have a card that allows me to cast a spell that's 1 swamp and 1 other mana cost. The same rules apply as long as it's on your turn. You tap your 2 mana, and you play the card. Now, there are certain rules about when a card comes onto the field, or a creature card specifically, if it can attack the same turn that it's summoned. This is sometimes the case if a creature has haste. However, for the most part, most creatures come out onto the field with summoning sickness. This means that they can't be tapped on their turn to do either an attack to activate its ability. It's just there standing and waiting until next turn. At the start of your next turn, then you can use its inherent ability or be able to attack with it. It doesn't allow for any cheap shots, unless it has haste, in which case, cheap shot away, my friends. And those are the basics. There are plenty of extra rules.
Wait a second, this is post-edit Tyson talking. It occurred to me as I was editing the video, I left out how one would be able to attack your opponent or your opponent's creatures and your life, which are the 2 most fundamental parts of the entire game. I'm a professional. Let's start with life. You start the game with 20 life, and you can take damage whether it be creatures attacking you if you don't have any blockers, or if there's a certain spell effect that your opponent deals that would deal damage to you directly. You can regain health through different spell effects, spell cards, however that's usually limited to white decks. Simply put, that's your life. You have 20 of it, make sure you don't go down to 0. Now the last thing I want to talk about is attackers and blockers. So let's use this as an example. Let's say that both I and my opponent have creatures on the field that could be attackers or blockers. On my turn, I want to declare that I'm attacking with my card. Now, my opponent can choose whether or not they want to have a blocker take the damage, or they want to take the damage to their face, reducing their life total. So, let's say that my opponent wants to block the attack. They declare their creature that is going to block it. Now, in this case, let's say that my creature's damage is going to deal more than their toughness. That means that this creature, my creature, destroys my opponent's. If it were the other way around, however, let's say that I declare the attack and this creature has a stronger toughness and damage output, then my creature dies. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that I declare my attack, the blocker comes in, and I destroy my opponent's creature. I now have to tap the creature that just attacked, because most creatures cannot attack more than once on your turn. There are some creatures that have something known as vigilance, which means that they don't become tapped. However, by and large, if you attack with a creature, they become tapped. That means that when it's your opponent's turn, you cannot use this creature to block. So say, for instance, your opponent is able to summon a different creature onto the board, and that creature has haste or something of the like and attacks you. You can't use your creature to block, which means you have to take the damage to your life. And that's basically combat. And those are the basics. There are plenty of extra rules that are kind of set for each card, different abilities that they might have that might change the game. However, I don't want to go into those right now. I just want you to have the capability of being able to have your intro deck, no matter what you're starting with, and just enjoy yourself. So where can you play? I wish I could tell you anywhere, but that's not exactly the case right now. If you're living with someone, probably the best bet is to both get you Planeswalker decks. These are basic decks that'll help inform you of how to play the game. The other option is to go into Magic the Gathering Arena. That is the online platform and online game where you can play it against anyone. Set up a digital account and boom, you're ready to go. It'll also give you a much more in-depth look at the different colors and what each one is the most powerful at doing. It's definitely a good first step in getting into the game. So with all this in mind, I wish you the best, Planeswalker. Take the worlds, dominate the planes, free the peoples that live there, and know that you are their hero.